Hello, everybody, and a very warm welcome to the Wine with Jimmy channel here on the likes of YouTube. Delighted that you've stopped by, and welcome to a wine educational channel. It's really helping those of you who want to learn more about certain topics in wine, specifically designed for those of you studying the world of wine for the likes of things like WSET. This is no exception. This video series here is on southern Italy for the D3 section of the WSET Diploma. And we're going to be looking at Sicily, Sicilia, the wonderful Mediterranean island forged from fire. It's a really splendid place. Sicilians will see themselves as a separate country to Italy, and it really has a real absolutely splendid history. It's got geographically different locations, topography it's different, geology it's different, and it's very fascinating. There you'll see in the background of the picture is Montebello, or otherwise known as Mount Etna, which dominates, of course, the north and the north east of Sicilia. Here is, in fact, the east coast, the beautiful city of Taormina with its ancient theatre, which has been, of course, very important throughout Greek and Roman times and all the way to today. It's still used, and what a sight to see some theatre or perhaps a concert with Mount Etna in the background. So we are looking at Sicilia on this series, series 4, and it's a big one. Whereas things like Puglia was only a 5-part series, Basilicata was only a 1-part series, Sicilia is a big one. It's an 8-part series. It's a big epic, a kind of Pliny the Elder natural history epic that we will go through. And you'll see there that it's split into things like introductory history and wine business in this video, climate, topography, and geology in the next video, then all the key grape varieties and their appellations. Parts 1 and 2 are available here as free content, but parts 3 all the way to 8 are only available on my e-learning portal. That's found at the bottom of the slide, winewithjimmy.com. A really useful channel to give you the resources you need to help you with your studies. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns during this video, please pop it in the comments section below this video. Make sure you click like and you click subscribe as well. You can use the social media at the bottom of every slide as well. So let's go through the introduction and the history and wine business of Sicilia. Nice little quote to begin with here. And I like this. This is from the polymath and historian Goethe from the 18th century. To have seen Italy without having seen Sicily is to not have seen Italy at all, for Sicily is the clue to everything. And we're going to go through its history to kind of put that into play for you. Let's have a look at the location first of all. So it is Italy's largest region, largest autonomous region, and the largest island in the Mediterranean. Sicily is an island, and it is huge. Its surface area is about 25,700 kilometers squared. And because of this, Sicilia has a wide range of topographic, geologic, and climatic conditions. It really is quite complex. First of all, let's get us some sort of geographical locations first of all. I'll do some blue arrows here for you. This gap here that separates Sicilia from the mainland is called the Strait of Messina. The island faces the Tyrrhenian Sea to the north. That's up here. That's where we find the likes of the Aeolian Islands, and the Ionian Sea to the west. That's on this side. The Canale di Sicilia, which is the Sicilian Channel, is to the south, and that's what separates it from North Africa. It is close to Tunisia, and the island of Pantelleria, which is the island to the south, is in fact the island closer to Africa than it is to Sicilia and mainland Italy. So that's its location. Let's talk a little bit about its history. Now, before the influences of major civilizations, Sicilia was populated by local tribes. First of all, we have to the far west of the island a small tribe called the Elmians. And they were first visited by the Phoenicians. So the Phoenicians here came from modern day Lebanon. And the Phoenicians were very, very important seafarers and sea traders, really important early maritime population. They traveled along most of the parts of the Mediterranean and they landed here on the western side of Sicilia. They are important because the Phoenicians are accredited to establishing Palermo, which is the capital city of Sicilia today. The other tribes, which are in the green shades, are the Sicani-based tribe, both the Sicanians and then the Sicels, or Sicels, I suppose you would call them. They are credited, these combined tribes, of being the oldest inhabitants of Sicilia. They claim potentially, well, I think a certain Greek polymaths and historians commented that it is likely that they came from Hispania, so from Spain, and came to Sicilia, but we have, of course, no evidence of that whatsoever. So we have our Phoenician influence on the west of the island. Then around 750 BC, we have Greek landings on the east of the island, and we have the Dorian and Ionian Greeks landing in this area. On the west of the island, we have the Carthaginians coming from North Africa, landing in areas where we find the Elmians, for example. So we have two major factions landing on either sides of the islands. At this time, this is important for wine because the Greeks are said to have introduced the pithos to Sicilia at this time. The pithos being a large amphora, a large clay pot used in the production of wine, the likes that we found by the Minoans, which are the civilization from Crete. Very important if you go to the likes of the Heraclean Archaeological Museum, you'll see a lot of these large clay pots, and important in places like the Palace of Knossos, for example, as well. So this is said to have been introduced, and this is something, in fact, very important in modern day Sicilian winemaking, because the likes of producers like Kos, who are located down near Vittoria and Ragusa, COS, they have actually introduced the pithos into their winemaking to give respect to the old ancient winemaking techniques found here on the island. After this, then, what happened in 580 to 265 BC? We have the Greco-Punic Wars. Just be careful with the word Punic. Punic actually is a derogatory term which was issued by the likes of the Romans and the Greeks to the Carthaginians. It is widely accepted that the Punic Wars were between different factions, the Carthaginians and Romans, but the Greco-Punic Wars happened in these dates. And this is where we have a series of conflicts between ancient Carthage and the Greek city-states. And that is when we find those dates. And then we find after this, so 264 BC, of course, to the end of the Western Roman Empire, sort of 600-700 years after that, there were a series of Roman landings. And of course, the Romans here in purple starting to dominate the northeastern point of this area. And it's important because we have a number of wines being mentioned during these times: Marmontinum, Mergentinum, Biblinos, coming from the Roman/Greek time, as mentioned by key historical figures like Pliny the Elder, for example. So what happened post-Roman, post-476? Well, to begin with, we have a lot of different Gothic factions. We have the Vandals, the Ostrogoths and the Byzantines coming through this area, but none of them really establishing a serious amount of time on the island. The first real serious amount of time was from 827 to nearly 1100 AD. So you're coming to around 300 years of history for Saracens, Arabs, and Berber occupation of Sicilia. Now, this is really important because Sicilia has always had a significant production of wine, and that's through Roman time, Greek time before that, and in these early years post-Roman. But with the religion that comes with the Arab populations, wine was not permitted and is not permitted under Muslim. And what you end up finding is that the wine production, or let's say wine production, becomes very much stifled, but doesn't completely become eradicated. And that is because grape production was permitted certainly for consumption, and varieties like Muscat of Alexandria was called Zabibo from the Arabs and by the Muslims here. So they call it Zabibo. It's actually our dried grape, it translates to. And today we still actually do call it Zabibo, as well as Moscato Bianco or Muscat of Alexandria. The Arab population here split it into three areas: Mazara, Dimone, of course, because of the real intensive Mount Etna here, and Noto, which is a city right on the southeastern section. So they're your three areas. Then after the Arabs, we have the Normans successfully occupying and invading Sicilia from the end of the 11th century to the end of the 13th century, and establishing it as the Kingdom of Sicily. That's K-O-S there, so the O should be small. And also, shortly after that, you have the German House of Hohenstaufen, important to remember for Frederick II. And then after that, shortly as well, the French House of Anjou. Under the Normans, the Hohenstaufens and Anjou, of course, with the Catholic influence here, there was once again an increase in grape production in this area. Then from the end of the 13th century towards the middle of the 19th century, we have the House of Aragon, and then towards the end of that, the Spanish Bourbons. So we have also within that the House of Savoy for a small amount of time, and the Austrian Habsburgs. But really, this is all producers that, all factions that would increase production of grape production in this area. And that leads you up to the 19th century, when Sicily becomes a part of the Kingdom of Two Sicilies. That is Sicily and Naples. And that leads you all the way up to the unification of Italy in 1860, 1861. Now, if you are a fan of literature, you must read this book on the left-hand side, because it really is a wonderful documentation of that time. It is fiction, but it is about a wonderful Prince of Salinas who has very important estates due to him being a part of the Bourbon dynasty. And it's about having to deal with change, because that change in 1860 is a change from that Bourbon dynasty to the unification of Italy as a republic, which is a very significant change. So it's about the Garibaldi landings, and it's about the Prince of Salinas having to deal with these changes, and also deal with his nephew, Tancredi, who is all for the changes, whereas he isn't necessarily for those changes. It's a fantastic book. It's very famous for the line about if we want things to stay the same, we're going to have to change. And the leopard never changes its spots is another key thing about this. Brilliant and often considered Italy's greatest work of literature. Robert Camuto as well makes a very good book, much more around the gastronomical experiences, but tying wine into it, called Palmento, named after the old winemaking processes found in the homesteads of Sicilia. And then, of course, John Szabo mentions his excellent stuff in volcanic wines, salt, grit, and power as well. Well worth looking at those texts. So the wine business here. Sicilia has Italy's largest area under vine, 100,000 hectares. Pre-phylloxera, it was actually around 300,000 hectares, but was severely decimated. It became actually, during phylloxera, it became the hotbed of activity to fill the void of wine production in areas which were early hit by phylloxera, France, for example, and then into places like northern Italy. So today, around 100,000 hectares. Most of it is, in fact, in the western side of the island. So south of Palermo, around Marsala and Trapani, is where most of it is found. So that's in the provinces of Trapani, Agrigento, and Palermo. Now, why? Well, that's because historically, a lot of the important production was due to Marsala. Often around John Woodhouse, for example, and the establishment of the fortified wine trade here, and grapes grown for that trade. And that's why we have such a big focus in that area. White wine, and this is interesting, accounts for nearly 2/3, but red and rosé are increasing. And white wine, you might be surprised by that due to the fact of its location being in the middle of the Mediterranean. You might find that you just expect red, but of course we've got white grapes grown in very interesting locations, such as Mount Etna, for example. I know this is a wine series, but I'm throwing in a few interesting sites because I am a huge fan of Sicilia. I have visited numerous times, and you must go and visit these places. So, of course, the ancient Greek city of Syracusa, is very famous. That's the Temple of Apollo. We find Syracusa in the southeast of the island. Also in the southeast, we have Noto, and you'll find a lot of Baroque architecture down here, and also in places like Ragusa, Modica, and Syracusa as well. And it looks as so. It's absolutely splendid. Also, Taormina, you've seen this picture already. Taormina sits really immediately to the east of Mount Etna, and east-northeast, and there is Etna in the background. Very famous for its theatre. It's a Greco-Romantic theatre, which is absolutely splendid. To the north of Sicilia are the Aeolian Islands, and the actual Greek name is Ioli, so it's it starts with Eoli, which is the Greek god who was the keeper of winds, and he was believed to live on the Aeolian Islands. It's an archipelago, which is 7 main volcanic islands and a few islets as well in there. The famous ones are Lipari, Stromboli, Salina, which is important for the Prince of Salinas, who's the important figure in the Leopard book, but also Volcano as well. And there is some good wine production on those islands. Palermo is the capital city that you would fly to on the western side. That is the Piazza Pretoria in the center of Palermo. Very lovely place. And also right on the west, we find Trapani, and this is Mozia Island, which is very important for the salt marshes near Marsala. And you'll see often many flamingos in this location. So a little bit of a trip to Sicilia, just to give you the setting as well. Please do join me for your next video on all things wine related. That is climate, topography, and geology. And it's another free video here on YouTube. If you do have any comments, questions, or concerns, please do get in touch. You can do so by commenting on this video below. Click like and subscribe whilst you are there, or get in touch by the social media. And if you are in the UK, of course, come and say hi. Come and say hi at one of my establishments for a glass, or a bottle. I've been Jimmy Smith. Ciao for now. Bye bye.